Hi everyone, good afternoon. I'm coming here from London. It's 7:30 in the morning, bright and sunny, lovely summer weather. I hope you're all well. Can you all type in yes if you can hear me or see me? I just want to make sure that I'm live and everybody can see me. If you can, then please type Y. Hey Tarun, how are you? Are we waiting for some people to join in? Because I can't see how many people are logged in at the moment. I'll wait for another few seconds and then I'll give my introduction. Hi, Kushbu. So just a brief introduction about myself. I started in public relations back in India and I worked for some of the leading PR agencies. And in 2007, I moved to the UK and I diversified from public relations to marketing, overall marketing. And over the last 15 years, I have um, basically been working in digital marketing, mainly on social media and content marketing. One of the reasons why I thought the whole transition was interesting because public relations is very closely related to how social media professions work because we are all about creating news, creating content, something that's relevant to our audiences, something that's newsworthy. So I think PR and social media go hand in hand. As I speak to more and more PR professionals, they feel that there's so much happening in social media that sometimes they feel overwhelmed and they almost want to upskill. However, I think that you have the necessary tools. It's almost taking those offline tools that you have as a public relation professional and making them more digitally savvy. You can please type in your questions as I speak, and I can answer them one by one. One of the things that I find very interesting is that social media has great accessibility to one, their audiences, and secondly, as a PR professional, journalism. So you have loads of journalists who are actively looking for news and engaging with people on social media. In fact, I looked at some interesting stats, and it was quite interesting to see that most of the journalists still go online, and 60% of them are online, 22% are on Twitter. Twitter seems to be a very, very active platform when it comes to journalists who are looking for news. and 85% find Twitter the most valuable social network. Um, so I'm just looking at questions, no questions so far. I would say that one thing that makes Twitter very attractive is that it's one platform which is having real-time conversation. And in terms of accessibility, you can, you can access the CEO or a senior stakeholder or even a senior journalist there. So in terms of accessibility and the search function, it's amazing. If you use relevant hashtags, you can actually monitor those hashtags from time to time and see, what are the conversations happening around it. I also recommend using Twitter lists. There are two types of Twitter lists that can be used. One is public and one is private. So public, there are loads of public Twitter lists that you can access, and they are mainly uh, you think about your black book or your, diary of, special diary of contacts. You can Similarly, you can create that digitally on Twitter, and there are loads of people who share their Twitter list publicly, so you can have a look, which means that you don't have to follow them, but you can create a list more like a watch list, which means you can keep looking at them, what they're posting, how you can engage with them, and from time to time collaborate. And Twitter also is great for SEO purpose. So if you use a relevant hashtag or you tag the right people, your content gets indexed very quickly. So I would definitely recommend it as a go-to channel, especially when you are looking at creating something quick, newsworthy, and you want to get the word out there. So I'm looking at the question, what was the shift like moving in from PR to being digital? Did your PR experience help? So this is an interesting question. I my shift or transition happened quite organically or naturally. I didn't really consciously plan it. But when I moved from India and I started working in PR, I found a slight disconnect because people were asking me how I used to work back in India, whether I have a list of contacts, of journalists here. Have I written a press release here? So there were loads of questions here, even though my skills were transferable. But I think the whole cultural shift really compelled me to, go more digital and look at something which, gives me a scope to broaden my skills. So it was quite organic, but I would say that I used to monitor, watch, read a lot of things about social media, how I can use social media in my day-to-day life, personally and professionally. My first platform that I used for social media was LinkedIn, and I absolutely loved it. LinkedIn is amazing in terms of connecting with, professionals at a business level because everybody there is there with a mindset of making professional connections. And I highly recommend anybody who is looking to move in that direction because the organic presence on LinkedIn and engagement is still very strong with respect to how you communicate, whether you want to send some private messages to somebody who you want to connect with. You can engage with them from time to time and understand, their personality. It's amazing. And although Facebook has moved on from organic platform to very much, like a paid social media channel, I would say LinkedIn is still very active. Kushbu is asking, with so many platforms popping up and gaining prominence, is Facebook still relevant? Does it really have the reach? So, like I said, good question. And I know there are a lot of people who, say that organic is dead on Facebook uh, to that extreme level. However, I feel that if you still have relevant content and you know your audiences are there, I would highly recommend having presence on Facebook, because Facebook is the largest social media channel. Your peers, your colleagues, uh, possibly your journalist, your business network, everybody is there. I think it is a matter of what kind of content you're creating and whether your audiences are tapping in on Facebook and looking and consuming that content. Um, so there's another question. Michelle is asking, there are tons of ways to leverage social media in your PR campaigns. What are your favorites and why? Okay, in terms of leveraging social media for PR, I think one, I find one of my most favorite is accessing lists on Twitter. I don't have to follow them. um, I I can just passively look at what these people are doing, and I can then engage with them very strategically. So I find that very powerful. I also find using relevant hashtags uh, one of the best ways to engage, create more visibility for your content. And also, sometimes you can see that if you use hashtags that are trending, you can actually reach more people like that. And journalists are actively looking at these hashtags. They like to create stories around trending hashtags. So when you go on Twitter, there's a section which is called trending, and they have a list of hashtags that are trending. You can use that, but be mindful of how you use that for your content. I would not use more than three hashtags in a piece of content. Otherwise, it is quite spammy. So, I mean, I find Twitter quite interesting. And another favorite that I have is hashtag journal request. If you want to monitor what are the stories that journalists are actively seeking, you can follow this hashtag actively and see what are the stories that are in trend. They move very quickly, so you have to be very, very proactive in responding to them. A lot of journalists either prefer, they would probably mention in that tweet, DM me or email me. Some journalists still like for you to email them, so don't be lazy. And I would highly recommend that if they clearly tell you email me and do not DM me, then I would just follow the instructions. I know that email is still a very powerful and the go-to place for journalists because they get inundated with loads of requests, but they prefer Twitter as their second most channel. So another question from Rishika. What tips would you like to give to online startups? Not the generic PR ones, something that really would differentiate you from existing online and offline competitors. So Rishika, I always say that every brand or every business have their own story and you are unique to what you do. So you should be telling your unique story. And if you can tell it in the way that your audiences want to listen to, then there's nothing more powerful. I would say that even though you want to differentiate from your competitors, however, it's still very important to see what your competitors are doing and how you can make it different from what they are saying. I also feel that one of the best things you can do is social listening. What I mean by social listening is see what your audiences want from you and how you can solve their problem or address their pain points. So knowing your audiences is very, very important when you're creating that unique proposition. I also recommend that you look at user personas, and I recommend looking at two or three user personas, which means that you're mapping out who your audiences are, what are their interests, their age, their online behavior, their what do they like doing on a day-to-day basis, what is their profession, and how do they consume those products and services that you provide. So I would say that understanding your audiences and how you can create a difference and address their pain points is one of the best ways to create your USP. Vinod asks, digital activation is almost always complementary to PR activities, but a lot of clients are resistant to it. How do I convince clients to start social media promotions along with PR? Um, Vinod, you can look out for some compelling case studies and articulate how they have changed their whole, strategy around their business through social media. There are lots of case studies out there. I would also, look at some of the compelling stats on why social media is important. There are lots of websites that you can go to. I prefer something called Social Media Today. I refer to that, and they currently have lots of case studies and lots of stats around why every business should be using social media. I would also say if you're, you know, look at some compelling case studies from the niche of your startup or your business or your clients, because they almost want to understand what their competitors are doing. A lot of business people think like that. So maybe that's another way to, spin the angle and say, look, this is what is happening. Hope that's helpful. Sneha is asking if someone starts a new social organization, which social media should be targeted at first? As an Instagram has youth population and I feel LinkedIn has more professionals, but strategically, what is the best way to kickstart? Sneha, it's a good question again, but then one of the most common that I've been asked. So, going back to what I was recommending, one, you need to understand what is the core value of your business. How does it address the pain points of your potential customers? Knowing who your audiences or customers are, knowing what their online behavior is very, very important when you start looking at social channels. For example, I do not have a Facebook business page, even though I I do a lot of Facebook ad campaigns, but my core audiences come mainly are engaging on Twitter and LinkedIn because I do a lot of work with business to business or even small businesses who are looking for these services. So I focus all my energies on these two channels. And that's why I would say for you to start, you should be looking at a very strategic way of understanding which social channels will be the best for your business. I I always say less is more. So start with one or two channels and build up the content there before go to 3 or 4 channels. There are loads of channels. So look at what your business provides and where your audiences are. The questions are moving quite quickly. So how do you start building a social media strategy, which is again quite the same thing as I've been saying about mapping out some of the key things. When I do a lot of work with the clients, I always start with something which is called a digital audit, which means I like to map out their digital footprint. Where are they? What their audiences are saying, monitoring how their content is performing, current content, and then looking at their competitors, what kind of content they are creating, and then seeing where are the gaps and how I can use those gaps to create valuable content. I think one of the key things, key takeaway from any work that I do is how do you provide value before you start selling anything, even to journalists or your business or your customers. You should be looking at how you can create value, why they should come to you. The basics of one should keep in mind while crafting one. So I have a specific structure which I tend to use. I would say that you should look at the SMART goals, which are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timely. These are the principles of marketing, and I tend to follow that. So I would say definitely um, consider that when you start creating your social media strategy. And then, like I said, there is user persona. There's looking at different channels and where are your audiences, and then creating a content strategy around it. So there are some content pillars that you can look at and focus on those key content pillars in order to create content. Keep it consistent. I would say that the best way of creating content strategy is look at those pillars and then create some key headlines on what your content would talk about, and then start putting in content in those sections or those buckets. um, what else I can say? Yes, so in terms of also creating that content strategy within that social media strategy, I would look at the ratio of 80 to 20, which means 80% is curated content, which is sharing other people's content, and 20% is your own content, which could be you selling something very indirectly, using your client testimonials or reviews of your product or services, um, creating memes, GIFs, uh, and then maybe using polls. Now, polls is a very interesting tool that you can use to do a survey, which you would do usually with a Google form or a type form, and you can use those polls. Now, LinkedIn has introduced poll as well. I've been using it for a while, and it's quite interesting the kind of results you get. Twitter also has a poll. Facebook has a poll as well. Instagram has quiz and polls and stickers. So use that to your advantage when you're creating these content pieces. And maybe that's another way of you understanding what your audiences are looking for. Pooja, often brands forget to create visibility on LinkedIn. Maybe that platform could be used better for spokesperson profiling. Your thoughts? Yes, thought leadership is one of the key things that you can use to your advantage. Uh, and I would say I always give an example of what differentiates Facebook or even Virgin from other brands. Because if you see their key stakeholders, they are quite active on LinkedIn, and they engage with people as if they are talking to them on a regular basis. So LinkedIn is a very powerful platform if you want to create thought leadership. However, I would say that it's not only for the C-level people. I would also go down to saying that if you can identify some key stakeholders, it could be, a mid-level manager or somebody from HR, somebody from marketing, somebody from distribution, somebody who is the head of PR or PR manager. So I would say that it's equally important for them to build their thought leadership and sharing valuable content, engaging with them on LinkedIn, because I feel that even though people feel that their audiences are not there, LinkedIn so far in the last year has become very, very popular with even mid-level PR exec, junior role people as well. It used to be a digital CV, but now it's much more than that. It's it's your personality that you can actually showcase on LinkedIn. You can, if when you start reading comments of different people, you can realize what kind of content do they like, how do they engage, their tone of voice, are they quite funny in the way they respond, do they like something more educational. So, yeah, I would say, Pooja, that LinkedIn, although it's always said that it's great for C-level people or senior people, I would also say that it's equally important for other people, because a lot of companies have started showcasing the culture within the organization through LinkedIn. which means that it's an equal opportunity for employees to shine out on LinkedIn and show their personality. I think I answered the question that Vinod Reddy has asked about social media platforms that are relevant for startups. LinkedIn is an interesting platform, as is Twitter. How does one understand which campaign is suited for which platform? Um, so, Twitter and LinkedIn can be used for the same campaign. I think it's the tone of voice and how you would use the content would vary. So, you have to repurpose the content when you start posting on Twitter and LinkedIn for the same campaign. LinkedIn can accept and work, the content can work beautifully if you can create some white papers or PDF files, which are very popular at the moment. You can use video content, slideshows, or even long text format. Twitter is fast moving, it's quite real time. So I would say that when you are creating something on Twitter, you have to say something which is relevant in 280 characters, use relevant hashtags, and then tag relevant people. I find it quite interesting and valuable when you are signposting content, which means you are directing people to a certain link. Twitter can work really well. But then make sure that when you are using Twitter for the same campaign, you're not just cutting and pasting the posts that you have created on LinkedIn. You have to be mindful that you only have 280 characters. There is one thing very interesting that has come up on Twitter very recently. You can create like a thread format, so under your own tweet, you can do, uh, you can do a continuous content format, which means you can add content to the same thread, and it becomes like a continuous dialogue. So that's another way of using a long form content if you're struggling to say something in smaller words, in less characters. Kushbu is asking, is Facebook ads promotions the only way to reach more audiences? Not necessarily, Kushbu, even though I'm a Facebook ad specialist. And I always say that businesses now need to think about Facebook ads very mindfully. Organic is difficult on Facebook, but not impossible. I still recommend that every time you think about a Facebook ad strategy, is there any content that you can create organically and get more engagement? I often find that businesses are behind vanity metrics. When I say vanity metrics, it means they are after more likes. I would say that businesses should focus more on engagement, shares, comments. So if you can create content which will be more valuable to engage with, I don't see a reason why you can't do it with Facebook. Having said that, yes, it's becoming even more difficult to reach, to create organic reach. So I would say look at a strategy which is both organic and Facebook ads paid. Sneha is asking, thank you. In order to get more footfalls in your social media, what is the best tools you use? You mentioned about polls and other engaging activities, but how do you increase the right followers? Once I paid for Facebook ad, I did get 2,500 likes, but even today I feel footfall in the post are not enough. So, Sneha, I'll give a very bizarre example or maybe something relatable. If you are, you know, dating someone, you wouldn't just send one message and leave it at that. You would want to build that relationship and see how you can take it further. It's almost like that. You can't put one post out there and forget about it. It is a very slow process. And whenever you're creating content, you have to think about it as a long term strategy. Social media is not quick and easy, it is providing consistent value on a day-to-day basis. So think about, your customers. You are taking them on a date and you are giving them an experience which is great and wonderful, and they want to keep dating you. It's the same thing. You want your customers to feel that they're wanted. You want you want them to feel that you're giving a lot of value to them, and that's the way you should really treat them. Like you're serving them with different kinds of messages. You're also acknowledging their presence. And in terms of content, that I also feel that one of the things that are very powerful uh, is using user-generated content. So anybody who uses your products or services, what do they say about it? You don't have to make them branded, very perfect videos. In fact, the more unprofessional, the more raw they look, they are more relatable. So I would say think about how you can even use, wordy testimonials into videos. Can you ask your customers to provide video testimonials, whether they've used your service or products, and what do they feel? How did they feel the experience about using that particular service or product? And that would give you a good social proof, which means that there are real people using your product or service or experiencing what you provide, and that would resonate more with the audiences. I hope that answers your question, Sneha. Vinod Reddy. Most of the startups do paid promotions for the Instagram and Facebook, especially in the lifestyle and food verticals. Is that valuable and does it help gain more business? Vinod, again, you can't just run paid strategy. You do have to have consistent organic strategy because, believe it or not, Facebook algorithm recognizes brands and businesses who are putting a lot of engage organic posts out there, which means when you are doing these paid promotions, your the Facebook algorithm will prefer to put your content in front of your customers more often than your competitors. So there's something called bidding, which is a part of the whole process of putting Facebook ads out there. So every sector has a bid. So like food and lifestyle, they are very competitive. So when you are working with food or fashion brands or retail brands, you would find that the cost per click or cost per thousand impressions are massive as compared to other sectors. Why? Because there's a huge competition out there and everybody is trying to you know, get more out of their paid ads. However, they forget that it's not only about just putting, um, paid promotions. Think about a shop. If you're selling something online, and then when they come to your website, they don't see a lot of products out there. They see a kind of, empty shop. I would say you treat your Facebook page and your Instagram account as your virtual shops. So you don't want to just keep doing paid promotions, but also keep putting organic content. So when they visit your page or your Instagram account, they see that there is a lot of content, valuable content for them. Vinod, again, it's very valuable, but then it has to be done very strategically. Some of the food brands or lifestyle brands, when they're creating these paid promotions, their messaging is unclear. They are not sure who they are speaking to. Their targeting is quite broad. So, for example, a retail brand is selling a wedding dress, but they are selling a wedding dress to somebody who's already married. That would be a waste of paid promotion. Similarly, last year there was a huge outcry about, baby brands targeting all the parents while they were not mindful of moms who've had miscarriage. So you have to be mindful when you put these paid promotions. who your audiences are, what are your messages, and don't be salesy when you're even if you're selling a product or services. Always talk about the benefits. Kushbu has asked a good question about hashtags. I don't recommend using Facebook hashtags. However, if you really want to use a hashtag on Facebook, maybe use one specific hashtag that is specific to your brand or business. Instagram, on paid promotion, I do not recommend using paid hashtags. For organic content, you can use up to 30 hashtags. Yes, it's good to use hashtags because Instagram is again all about hashtags. However, do not always use something which has a massive reach. I would say always mix it up by when you are using hashtags. Use something which has a wide reach, but then again use some that are that have a following of say 10K, maybe 50K, but they are quite relevant to your audiences. Pooja is asking about new platforms like Medium and Firework are catching a lot of attention. How do you recommend using these, and if there are any other platforms? I haven't heard of Firework, but Medium is quite popular. I have used Medium for my clients as a great way of signposting again. So blogs is a great way of one boosting your SEO, and also it's a great way of creating value for your customers. So Medium is a very good platform. It is integrated with your website. So when you are using social media to direct people to specific pages, you can actually redirect them and then repurpose the content. Sorry. So yeah, Medium is very powerful. I know that people use it quite regularly when they're creating blog outreach. So definitely look at that. I know that there are lots of journalists who tend to use Medium to voice their opinions as well. So worth looking at it. I will check about Firework and I'll come back to you. Sneha, does it affect the brand of an organization or business social media page, let's say Instagram, if they tag other like-minded businesses? Hmm. It's so tempting to tag people. I know because I sometimes want to tag some celebrities or influencers. But then again, it can be very annoying for people who don't know you. So when you start thinking about tagging, you need to firstly acknowledge whether you have a relationship with them or not, whether it is relevant or not. Um, I will not tag them unless I have a relationship with them, unless I've connected with them. And I would almost seek their permission if they are happy for me to tag them. If you do not want to have a direct conversation with them, then possibly how tagging would work is maybe ask a question in your post like, so and so, what do you think about it? So and so, I read your content around it, and this is what inspired me to put a similar content piece around it. So they value that. But if you are just tagging them without any context, it can be very annoying, and sometimes they can report you, especially if you are tagging thought leaders or influencers, because you want to almost build a relationship when you're tagging with them and not really put them off. Victoria, what is your perspective on LinkedIn versus Twitter versus Facebook for running a digital marketing promotion in India? Victoria, again, it doesn't matter where you are, whether you are in India or the UK. I believe that the relevance of which social media platform you use would depend on where your audiences are. So, depending on who you're talking to, you should be looking at creating content on that social media platform. I hope that helps. Hey, Sarika. I'm so happy to see some familiar faces after years. I'm looking back at some of the other questions to see if I can answer them. I think there are a lot of questions that are quite related to what I've answered already. I wanted to actually talk about crisis management, which is the biggest nightmare for PR professionals, and I've dealt with it in the past. And I think it's a pressing um, issue for PR professionals. Definitely look at it as a great way of, social media as a great tool for crisis management. And I would always start from brand reputation. So I read somewhere very interestingly that, do not use social media for just crisis management. Plan ahead. So when you see that there is a specific piece of content which is quite topical, now with coronavirus, there are a lot of businesses who are putting content out there, and there's every chance for content to be, trolled or people to put negative comments out there. If they are relevant to what you're saying and there's a lot of agony around it, I would say be very proactive and not reactive when you're dealing with crisis management. So listen to what they're saying and answer them proactively. Do not hide. I feel that a lot of businesses do not answer proactively or listen to what their audiences are saying on a particular post or product or service. They are not very good with handling negative comments. And, social media algorithms don't like it. You don't want to be reported, and because it's very easy for people to flag up your content or report, and that can actually shut your social media platform. So I would say, as a business, it's also your responsibility to handle and manage crisis in the best possible way. It's almost like if a customer walks into your shop, you do not, you know, show them the door, you listen to them and you show the empathy, and then you address their concerns with the right solutions. Similarly, on social media, you should do the same. You should look at, you know, what are their problems are and how you can address them. If there's something that you think is very pressing and you cannot address them right away, you can encourage them to have a dialogue in a message, in a personal message, which means you have taken the burden, the emotional burden of them putting more negative comments in publicly. And it also shows that you are quite responsible as a business to listen to your customers. Victoria, which course would you recommend for a starter in digital marketing? There are loads of courses. I'm not really sure if you have lots of courses that, universities or colleges are providing in person. Of course, there's lots of virtual courses now available. I would look at Facebook Business Blueprint. They have very valuable courses that are free. I would definitely recommend you to go through that. Hootsuite and Buffer, they are two social media scheduling platforms, but they are much more than that, and they have some free courses as well. They are very good. They are very current. So I would recommend looking at some of the free courses before you invest in a course, because you want to also understand whether, you know, you like that side of digital marketing. Digital marketing is quite broad. So when somebody says digital marketing, you almost have to break it into different sections, whether you are talking about SEO, or you're talking about Google Ads, Facebook ads, um, social listening, social media. There are so many different aspects of digital marketing. So I would say break it down into different parts of digital marketing and see which one do you prefer. How do you think Facebook fares in India versus the rest of the world in terms of popularity and reach and effectiveness? Mm, I, I think I'll have to come back on how it fares as compared to other markets because I always treat these platforms from a global perspective. Even though I am in the UK, I manage projects for global clients. So I definitely would look at, if you are looking at content specifically for Indian audiences, then what do they like? How do they consume content? What kind of content format would they like? I think videos are quite powerful, storytelling is powerful. So, irrespective of where you are, it still is very relevant to create these formats. I know that when I'm speaking to a lot of audiences in Europe, specifically France, Germany, they like to have content in their own language. But I think in India, English is I think the first language now. So unless you are speaking to a demographic that is not very uh, familiar with English as a language, I would then look at creating content which is more regional. However, if you think language is a barrier, then there are other ways of communicating. So like memes, GIFs, they are quite, interesting. If we are using videos, you can also create subtitles in different languages. So that means you are reaching your different audiences with the same video format, but you are changing the subtitles. I hope that was useful, Ishita. I am looking at some other questions just to see if I haven't missed anything. I think so far I have addressed most of the questions. So, as somebody who changed career from public relations to digital marketing, more specifically Facebook advertising now or social media strategist, I would say that definitely look at your interest level. Because, like I said, it's massive. There is so much of information out there. There are loads of free resources that you can tap into, but look at what is your specific interest, whether you like creating more content, whether you like more community management, which means you like to listen to what your customers are saying or what your community is saying and answering that, whether you like to be a content person, so you like writing more blogs, more content for social media channels, or whether you want to go a step further and learn more about SEO. So just understanding where your skills are and how you can adapt your current skills, something more meaningful, I would definitely recommend going a step further and looking at what are the available skills or resources out there. Um, there are loads of links and resources, and I'm happy to put them on the comment section after this session gets over. And feel free to, of course, ask any questions in this place, and I'm happy to answer them after the session as well. I would say use LinkedIn, Twitter to engage with your audiences, whether you you like a certain thought leader, listen to what they are saying, the content that they're putting out there, follow relevant hashtags. You can create your own list on Twitter, whether you are looking to tap into different journalists. They are so accessible now that you don't really have to go through a long cycle of sending too many press releases, but being more proactive on what they require and how you can help them. I always feel that the more you give, the more you get. So if you share, collaborate, it's the best way of being on social media. And that's how people tag you. So a few years ago, when I started in social media, back after my maternity break, I did a project on community engagement. So I live in a specific area. So I created a social media channel on Twitter specifically to tap into businesses and people in my area. And it was a channel where businesses could come and engage with everyone. They could, put their services out there. They could talk about, you know, something that is specific to that area, some issues that they are there, and how people could help each other. It has worked so well that I actually don't manage it anymore. People use that platform as a way to communicate and reach people within the community. And I feel that if you can build an online community for yourself, not having, a physical group or something, but if you can build a virtual network, it can be really powerful. It means that whenever they see that there's a specific skill being asked and they know that you are the right person, they will tag you. If a journalist is asking for a specific, niche or a question or a request, they would be aware that, they can ask Victoria or Kushbu or Ishita, to answer that. So definitely use these platforms to share your perspective, your content, shout out what you're doing, not in a salesy way, but something you have done for your client that has worked really well, something more trendy. Around coronavirus, there's so much out there, but there are a lot of businesses who are trying to use this as a sales pitch. It's very, it's a clickbait. I don't recommend that. I would say be more empathetic to use this time to provide value. I have been mentoring a lot of people through virtual lessons during this time, and it's the way to pay it forward. So before you start selling something, see how you can provide value. Before you start reaching out to a journalist to get your story published, see if you can help them link into somebody who would have the right, you know, content for them for their story. It does feel strange, but it works really well. It's a ripple effect. It really has helped me a lot. Sharing other people's content. There are a lot of people who I follow on LinkedIn and I share their content because I find that they are quite valuable in what they're saying. So I would invite you all to do the same when you are on these social media channels. Talk about different, subjects within your area and how these businesses are doing at the moment, how these sectors are doing, how we can make them, how we can use a creative approach in these sectors. Um, what else? I'm thinking. And don't be afraid to show your personality. Whether you are a funny person, whether you like to educate people, whether I mean, you could be an introvert and you don't like talking a lot on social media, but then maybe you can then send a direct message to them. But then when you're sending a direct message, share value again. I also feel that when you are connecting with people on LinkedIn, do not just press the connect button, follow them for a while. I, if you see my LinkedIn account and if you come across it, you will always see the follow button first because I encourage people to follow me first and see what I'm sharing and encourage them to engage with me. I do the same when I am trying to connect with people. I always follow them first. Um, you're welcome. Are there any more questions? Because I can go on and on about social media. During these times, I was looking at the stats, and it's so interesting that all the channels have massively increased in their engagement. Their organic engagement rate has gone up. Even for LinkedIn, when people think it's a business platform, there are a lot of people sharing their stories. So that's why I said storytelling is very powerful. I have my own agency, a virtual agency. I have my own business, but when I engage with people, I do not always talk about my business. I talk about what I'm passionate about, what interests me, um, what do I read, how I engage with people, because those things are very valuable to talk about your personality and align your energies to others. So definitely look at that. And even if you are not a business, I would still want you to think about how you can create those user personas, understanding their behaviors, and how you can engage with them, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Instagram stories is very powerful. People are looking at more stories and Instagram lives now. I think video as such is very powerful. Live streaming is great. For example, I'm speaking to you all from London, and the accessibility is massive. I can speak to so many people in just within an hour, and I can share my knowledge. Um, then Instagram Live, IGTV, Instagram Stories, LinkedIn Live. LinkedIn has recently introduced polls. See how you can use LinkedIn polls. Facebook polls is quite powerful as well. Facebook Stories. So use these different mediums and experiment. You have to test a lot before you find which is the best platform for you. So use the time and energy and be strategic about your content. I hope that was helpful. Thank you. Take care. Bye. And please feel free to post your questions and I can answer them later on. Take care. Have a lovely weekend, everyone. Bye.